Alrighty, welcome back to the channel. I'm Rosa Tulips, and today we're doing something a bit different. First off, I do want to apologize for if the quality of this video seems a bit more rugged than what I usually upload. Granted, that's a pretty low bar to hit. But I'm trying to get this video and then a second video out this week because I missed uploading last week. And on top of trying to do my college work before the end of the week so that I can go visit my grandparents over the weekend. But today I have a pretty interesting premise that combines two of my favorite things of all time, that being game design and, well, video games. And so I introduce you all to Deep Dive Design, where I go ahead and look at characters from For Honor, fucking Dead by Daylight, and other games that I might have an interest in that I want to explore different aspects of game design and other such things, like exploring why a character is the way they are from a game design standpoint. Note that I'm not an actual game dev. I'm an aspiring game dev. I'm taking courses to become a game dev, and this is sort of just kind of a fun little exercise I want to do to sort of showcase what I learn, and just kind of a way to see games that in a light you might not previously expect. That being said, today's episode is on a character that I believe a lot of people tend to agree that they aren't really that well thought out from any sort of perspective, especially from a balance or design perspective. That character being, of course, the one you see on screen right now, Warmonger. And a large part of the complaints surrounding Warmonger is their similarity to another hero, that being Warden. So today's video, I'm going to be focusing on Warmonger's design, their relationship to Apollyon, their relationship to Warden, and ultimately what I believe Ubisoft's goal was in designing the Warmonger. So without further ado, let's get into just overall what Warmonger is as a character and as a playable hero in For Honor. Alright, I am here in the Hero Tactics with Warden, and you're probably wondering, why on earth are you doing this with Warden first? And, simple. I wanted to highlight a few things about Warden that differentiate them from Warmonger from a design standpoint as sort of the Scorpion, the Ryu, and the sort of the Mario of For Honor. So what about Warden makes their design so great as a beginning character? Well, first off, their moveset is extremely simple. They have 3 chains, a crushing counter, barely anything really that complicates their character. And we can see this in the hero tactics, where they go over 2 things, namely your light, heavy chain. But there is something interesting about Warden, and that's the fact that they are the only Vanguard without a heavy to light chain. And for a character who is supposed to be an introduction to For Honor's combat system, then that's kind of an issue because Warden is the only character without a heavy to light chain, which makes them come off as a bit more clunky than, say, Kensei or, in this case, Warmonger. Another thing that complicates Warden as sort of the simplistic character is this right here, the Crushing Counterstrike. Top light attack has superior block properties during the startup. Use it to counterattack, attack becomes unblockable after a counter. Warden's Crushing Counter is not really good, but there's a few things about it that make it very complicated that new players just might not be able to pick up on. Namely, that it's Crushing Counter property. As you can see, I'm able to go ahead and get 2 lights before I have to go into something else. This, however, is not guaranteed, and it's the only light chain that isn't guaranteed. As everything else, I can get 2 guaranteed lights, then a heavy follow-up. But not with the top light. I have to get a crushing counter with that in order to get the second guaranteed light. Not only that, but having top light be the only crushing counter Warden has access to doesn't really teach the mechanic of a crushing counter, in my opinion. Crushing counter is supposed to be an option you use defensively from all 3 guards. Yet, Warden is the only character with a crushing counter that can only come from one side. This makes Warden unnecessarily complicated in my opinion. Especially for a character who is supposed to be introducing new players to For Honor's gameplay and, sort of fighting style. Having this weird discrepancy between the top light and the side lights just goes to complicate them unnecessarily. As for everything else though, the moveset's fine. It flows like butter, there's nothing really you need to care about, and the bash, while it can be a bit complicated for newer players to understand in my opinion, it's basically the only part of their kit that new players might have trouble understanding. So, besides from that, and the whole heavy into light chain missing, overall, Warden is a pretty interesting character and a pretty good introduction to For Honor's combat system. Alright, so I am in the hero tactics with Warmonger, and already we can see the very similarity with Warden, namely light, heavy chain. However, there are a few things that differentiate Warmonger here already. Namely, she has a heavy to light chain. This, combined with the fact that she is also a vanguard for the... Sorry, excuse me. What the hell was that? I don't know. This, combined with the fact that she is also a vanguard for the Knight faction, makes it so that she's already pretty noob-friendly. She manages to succeed in the 2 areas that I already outlined with Warden, where Warden struggled to, teach new players about heavy to light chains and how to properly teach crushing counters. Warmonger ignores that by having a heavy to light chain, and actually has no crushing counters, so she doesn't accidentally teach a mechanic or improperly teach one. She does, however, have this. Do you see the problem here? Well, it comes into this part. Her main bash, the Praying Claw. Now, Praying Claw can be initiated from both a dodge, but it can also be initiated from light attacks. And already, that's sort of an issue. Her light attacks have the enhanced property, which gives her an easy way to go into her bash, sure, but the game doesn't actually teach you any way to... But the game just doesn't teach you that you shouldn't be spamming your light attacks. Throughout the entire hero tactics on this section, the game always tells you to just go for the light attack to get into Praying Claw. It never... And that's sort of the problem with hero tactics here. It doesn't teach you that... It basically just teaches you with Warmonger, you want to spam light attacks. This isn't helped by the fact that her light attacks are enhanced, which makes them ignore blocks deflecting off of them, but because it goes into her bash, there's an incentive for new players to spam light attacks into their opponent, which unfortunately gives new players the habit of just sort of spamming the hell out of their light attacks, which at higher reps and skill levels will just result in them getting parried and then frustrated. The game does nothing to teach players to mix their light and heavy attacks up. And you might say, oh, but what about this section? No. It doesn't. This main mix-up I've chosen here might seem like a bit of an outlier, but if you look at all of them, not a single one is an actual mix-up between her light and heavy. This one is just light, heavy, cancel into your invincibility frame. This one just doesn't actually do anything. It's just this into a light attack, which once again is a big problem. So not only does Warmonger have a moveset that encourages you to spam light attacks, but the game itself doesn't teach you that you shouldn't go for it, and you should instead throw out a heavy attack to mix up your opponent, to mix up their timing, and more especially, make sure you're not getting free parried. But let's focus on some of the other parts of her kit, namely the side dodge heavy. This move is extremely good because of its iframes and extended dodge property, making it basically glide around your opponent. On top of that, it's a neutral unblockable that she can access relatively quickly, and because basically every part of her kit puts her at frame advantage, she can go into this very safely to mix up her opponent. There is, however, a problem with this, and you'll see it a lot with newer Warmonger players. They will crutch on this thing to get them out of every possible scenario. This isn't helped by the absurd iframes and extended dodge property either, as it forces players to basically forced into a guard break in order to cancel out her offense, or her defense in this case. Not necessarily a problem, but once again, it goes to show that Warmonger is a very noob-friendly character. However, in doing so, it sort of instills bad habits into newer players. Then we have this. What is this? Okay, maybe I shouldn't mess up like 3 parries in a row. Okay, maybe not 4. This move. What were they thinking? So this move does a ton of damage, you get it on heavy parries, and if there's a wall nearby, your opponent just gets melted. Why? I believe that does about like 30 bleed. I believe that with the bleed it does about 30 damage total on a heavy parry if you manage to glide with a wall. Why does this exist? Last I checked, I don't believe Apollyon has a move like this in her repertoire, unless I just didn't see it while I was playing the campaign. So, for all I know, this move is a completely unique decision to Warmonger herself. And it serves a very important part to her kit. It puts her at frame advantage, which allows her to do things like I just did right there, where I cancel out this PK with my dodge bash. But for newer players, this just unnecessarily makes Warmonger a very oppressive and damaging character. Which, once again, for a character who is supposed to be easy to play, that's not entirely a bad thing. Making a character who's noob-friendly isn't necessarily bad. But Vicious Impale is just a bad move in all of aspects of design. Especially for Warmonger as a character. Because this is too powerful a move on Warmonger. And it serves nothing to connect her to Apollyon. It does basically nothing except be broken. If the goal was to make a move that put her at frame advantage, on heavy parry she can just do this, which puts her in position to go into her bash, which is the main point of her move. Or, if it's for frame advantage, she can just parry the incoming attack, dodge forward, and do the bash finisher, which also puts her at frame advantage. Vicious Impale only does 30 damage, so that it is the definitive best option when applicable. Because on light parry, you can go for a top heavy, which does, I believe, more damage. So why would you use Vicious Impale in that scenario if you get a light parry? Vicious Impale is basically only there to serve as a good option for heavy parries by simply trumping every other possible option Warmonger has. If you lower the damage of Vicious Impale, Warmonger players are just more incentive to throw out a light attack so that they can go into their bash mix-up. Which is something you would want with a character like this, right? You want a Warmonger to go into her bash. That is the main focus of her kit. So why make Vicious Impale at all? It makes zero sense. There are a few final things I want to say before I wrap up this video on Warmonger. Namely, what is her design supposed to achieve? Well, if you actually look at her design, and just sort of her development in general, it's very clearly that this is a character supposed to be just Apollyon from the story mode, but enhanced so that it can keep up with modern times. This move, it's feintable, it's undodgeable, and it's supposed to complement her dodge bash by stopping people from simply rolling away. Not a bad thing. In fact, it's pretty decent. Apollyon has a very similar move in the campaign where she closes the gap, except it's missing out the feintable and the undodgeable properties, so giving those to Warmonger to make her keep up with modern day For Honor, not a bad idea. For her bash mix-up, however, it seems a bit out of place, right? Why only after light attacks can she go into her bash instead of after a heavy attack like Warden? Well, there's the thing. Warden used to not be able to do that. Warden was forced to use a light attack in order to go into his bash. He couldn't go into a bash after performing a heavy attack of any kind. So, if anything, Warmonger is more akin to Apollyon in her iteration in the campaign by following Warden's own rules. And there lies the problem if why they're so similar. Warden is a character from the campaign who was updated over the years to make sure that he didn't fall out of favor from For Honor's design philosophy. Warmonger was a character who took a Warden from the campaign, added the few moves that made them a boss character, such as this, and then enhanced that moveset so it wouldn't fall off. What resulted in happening was a character who many people would consider either a side grade or a complete upgrade. Because Warden has this same move, except he can't feint it, and it doesn't have the undodgeable property. He doesn't have a dodge attack like Apollyon, because that was Apollyon's own move. And Vicious Impale is stupid. So, the reason why many people consider Apollyon, or Warmonger, to be just better Warden, is because it effectively just took a better Warden from the campaign and made them better so that it could fit with For Honor. Well, Warden was a character who has been with For Honor since the start, including that campaign iteration, but updated so that he wouldn't fall off throughout time. They basically did the same thing twice, but Warmonger had more stuff to work with because they were directly taking from Apollyon from the story mode. Which is how you end up with a character which many people believe to just be Warden but better. Because from a design perspective, that's basically just Warmonger. Apollyon was designed to be a stronger Warden in the campaign mode, so when you take that base blueprint and enhance it so that it could stay with the competition, for example, giving them hyper armor on heavy attacks, undodgeable on their gap closer, being able to feint their gap closer and their dodge attack, you not only create a character who's very loyal to the campaign iteration of Apollyon, but you also create a character who inadvertently is just Warden, but better. So, overall, what is Warmonger supposed to be? Well, it's very obvious Warmonger is supposed to be Apollyon from the campaign mode, but simply playable. In doing so, there's a lot of things that I didn't cover in this video to sort of highlight other things, such as her noob friendliness and her contradiction with Warden, but there are a few things I do want to cover before ending the video that sort of play into this idea that she is just supposed to resemble the boss character from the campaign. Namely, the hyper armor heavies, giving her the feeling of being downright unstoppable. Her feats are something that I would want to cover, but those were just very poorly designed on launch, and nowadays they're just kind of meh, in my opinion. They're still really good in team fights, but they're just downright busted. But Apollyon and Warmonger are characters designed to be very similar, as obvious, because just look at them. But in terms of actual gameplay, Warmonger is just kind of old Warden had they buffed him in a different way. There are a few things that are different, for example, the heavy to light chain, which in all honesty only makes Warmonger more akin to being a new player character than Warden is. So what could they do to differentiate the two characters and make Warmonger have a more unique identity than simply just being a reskinned Warden from the campaign? Well, there's a lot of things you could do. For example, the zone attack. In my opinion, this should be replaced with Vicious Impale, and I'm going to explain why. I know that sounds devastating on paper, but just hear me out real quick. Make Vicious Impale extremely slow. I'm talking like Demon's Embrace slow from Shigoki. So that A, you can use it on light parries exclusively, and you could probably get away with increasing the damage just a little bit to compensate, but the frame advantage it puts you at is good enough, in my opinion. So you do that, and Warmonger suddenly becomes the only character with a neutral undodgeable, not neutral undodgeable, a neutral unblockable, which is very slow and very reactable, so it doesn't do much to help her offense in neutral, but she becomes the only charge bash character to have a move like that to catch out people. Imagine she goes ahead and she charges her bash, cancel it, goes into her zone attack, and she does Vicious Impale instead of whatever that was. That could create a very interesting roll catch scenario, or potentially catch people who aren't paying attention off guard. It's very interesting to think about, but honestly, there's not really much we can do now, as Warmonger isn't a character I believe Ubisoft isn't going to go back and try to redo her animations on, because they kind of just stole the animations from Warden, but moreover, they stole the animations from Warmonger, who was just a reskin of Warden at the end of the day. So what is Warmonger's role in For Honor exactly? She's supposed to be this domineering boss character who you can play, and unlike in the campaign or memes you see all the time, she actually manages to be better than her boss iteration. Mostly due to the various enhancements, for example, the hyper armor, the claw doing bleed damage, Vicious Impale being fucking stupid, the fact you can cancel most of her gap closers, and have very oppressive offense, high invincibility frames. It creates a character who's very noob friendly, but also very survivable. And ultimately, what better way than to convey a character who is supposed to be a boss than have high survivability? Well, I'm gonna leave that over to post-commentary, Rosa, to finish up the video. So, what exactly can we learn from Warmonger's design? Well, we can learn a few things, namely how to not really make a interesting character. Warmonger was simply a character that they took from the campaign and updated so that she could stay in the state of For Honor. The only reason why she is an interesting and unique character to learn and pick up as is because she is taking a character who is already designed to be noob friendly and reskinning them to just sort of make them better, and unfortunately that leads to a lot of problems with her design. Not only is it very lazy, but it also leads to a lot of problems forming, as you take a very noob friendly design and you unfortunately create bad habits, such as the spamming of her dodge attack and the spamming of her light attacks. But there are a few interesting things we can learn from her design, namely how to correctly create a boss character that is playable and enjoyable. As Warmonger is probably the only example in any of history that I think that you actually have a better version of the boss character than the version you fought. And honestly, that is a very hard thing to do, and developers just don't seem to manage to do that, but Warmonger is a prime example of it being done correctly. Unfortunately, the main reason why that is because Ubisoft's boss philosophy is kinda just take character from game, give them 2 new moves, and add a big ass health bar. There are a few other videos I have planned to do on this series. I plan on making a video where I delve into Hidekiri's design, and I probably will make a video on Warden specifically, but I kind of already covered all my thoughts on Warden as a beginning friendly character. Also, a large part as to why Warmonger's design ended up this way was due to her development. As we all know, Warmonger came out in 2020, which was prime COVID era, which unfortunately affected a lot of the development for Ubisoft and their heroes, and unfortunately, Warmonger is likely just a byprocess of that. If they ever rework Warmonger, though, I would want to see a full-on overhaul of her as a character. Make it more focused on characterizing Astria rather than giving us the power fantasy of playing Apollyon. I would love to see more half sorting from Warmonger, not only to visually distinct her from not Warmonger, from Warden, but also because, well, we don't exactly have a hero who uses half sorting as a technique at all. So I would love to see that if they ever do revisit Warmonger or redo her animations, but unfortunately, Warmonger isn't a character they're really too keen on touching up. That being said, I hope you all enjoyed this video, and hope you enjoyed my ramblings about game design, and overall the design of Warmonger as a character. That being said, I do have another video planned at the end of this weekend, because A, I didn't upload last week, and you already heard from the beginning of the video. Make sure you like, make sure you subscribe if you want to hear more shit like this. And with that being said, I hope you all enjoy, and have a wonderful time. Cheers.